All right, guys. So a couple of days ago, I brought you that story of the Biden administration indefinitely delaying a scheduled State Department report that was supposed to come out determining whether or not Israel is in violation of international law. Now, the reason that this is important is because there were really only one of two ways that this report could have gone. And option number one would basically be the State Department completely obliterates any remaining crumbs of credibility that they had and says that Israel is in compliance with international law, or that there's not enough evidence to say that they aren't. And option number two would be that they admit that Israel has been violating international law, and therefore the weapons that we are sending them are totally illegal under things like the Leahy Law. Now, we've officially gotten this report. It has been released now, and the Biden administration went with option A. They are, here from The Intercept, saying that Israel likely used U.S. weapons, U.S. supplied weapons in violation of international law, but that's okay though, according to the State Department. So what are they actually talking about? Well, here from Sean Musgrave and Prem Thacker. They say, in a long-awaited report, the State Department lays out numerous suspected international humanitarian violations by Israel in its war on Gaza, yet suggests no changes in policy or consequences. The Biden administration concludes that it is likely that Israel used U.S. supplied weapons in, quote, incidents that raise concern about the country's legal compliance, while crediting Israel for investigating them. So basically what they're saying here, it looks like, is like, well, there's some iffy situations, right, that have transpired over the last 6 or 7 months of this genocide. Some iffy situations, but Israel is a democracy, and they have their own internal investigative process, and we trust them, and they're doing a fantastic job so far. That's what they're trying to claim here. They continue. They say the report also concludes that Israel is not currently blocking humanitarian aid. Huh? Despite, quote, deep concerns about action and inaction by the government resulting in aid delivery to Gaza that remains insufficient. Do you guys see the brazen rhetorical sort of tricks that they're trying to play here? So Israel is not violating international law because they are not, arbitrarily blocking the aid from getting in, but they also have deep concerns about action and inaction by the government. This is as vague as you could possibly imagine. This is the State Department saying, we do not want to put out a report that conclusively says one way or the other that Israel is violating international law or they're fully compliant with international law. So we are going to basically play both sides. We're going to say, well, there are situations we're concerned about, but we don't really think anything should be done about it. The idea that Israel has not been blocking humanitarian aid from getting into Gaza is so detached from reality that I really wouldn't even know where to begin. They've been doing that since October 7th. Okay? I've shown you guys the data. I've shown you guys the statistics. I've shown you guys the images of thousands of trucks waiting on the border of Gaza that Israel is arbitrarily holding up from getting in. I've shown you guys the statements from Israeli politicians and, political figures who openly state their intentions of blocking humanitarian aid. The idea that this is up in the air is completely absurd. It's detached from reality. It is a lie that they are including in this report. They continue, though. They say the State Department said it's reasonable to assess that Israeli forces have used U.S. weapons in ways that are inconsistent with international humanitarian law or the best practices for mitigating civilian harm. So which one is it? Again, inconsistent with international law, or are they violating international law? That's a very simple, word usage there that they're swapping out, but it effectively is an admission that, yeah, of course they're violating international law. Of course they're blocking the aid. Of course they're not consistent with international law in this genocide that they're in the midst of committing, but we're going to use vague rhetoric like this to try to not make an actual conclusive point here. They say, but at the same time, the report hedges that it is also important to emphasize that a country's overall commitment to international law is not necessarily disproven by individual violations, so long as the country is taking appropriate steps to investigate and, where appropriate, determine accountability, right? So in other words, we trust Israel to investigate themselves and to hold themselves accountable for potential violations of international law. I mean, Jesus Christ, they say the report also hedges on Israel's responsibility for civilian casualties in Gaza, saying that the U.S. intelligence community assessed that there was no direct indication of Israel intentionally targeting civilians, but also that Israel could do more to avoid civilian harm. I mean, again, these are contradictions, depending on how you want to read it. How can you possibly say Israel could be doing more to avoid killing civilians, but at the same time, they're following international law because they're doing everything they can to avoid killing civilians? It's a direct contradiction. I mean, there's no indication that they have directly targeted civilians? Really? How about that recent WCK strike, where they hit not once, not twice, but 3 separate times an aid convoy that was communicating with the IDF at the time in what was supposed to be a deconflicted zone? How does that happen if it's not an intentional strike? How does it happen that Israel obliterates a majority of the standing structures in Gaza, especially in the north? How does it happen that they do controlled demolitions of university buildings? They've obliterated the education system in Gaza, the healthcare system in Gaza. A vast majority of the people they have been killing have been civilians. In fact, a vast majority of the people they've been killing have been just women and children. But somehow we're going to conclude that they have never targeted civilians. Never targeted civilians. That is just a totally insane claim. But this is what the State Department is saying. They say, while Israel has the knowledge, expertise, and tools to implement the best practices for mitigating civilian harm in its military operations, the results on the ground, including high levels of civilian casualties, raise substantial questions as to whether the IDF is using them effectively in all cases. So we have questions, we have concerns, but we're not going to say that they violated international law ever. I mean, they say this 46-page report includes a section addressed to the Leahy Law, a 1997 law that prohibits the U.S. assistance to any unit of a security force or a military of a foreign government if the Secretary of State has credible information that such a unit has committed gross violations of international law. So they're saying there's no evidence that any Israeli unit in Gaza has violated international law. There's not substantive evidence to make that conclusion, is what they're saying here. Now, they also add down here in this Intercept report that this memo, it's called the National Security Memo 2020 or the NSM 20, also required the administration to report to Congress on whether or not there were credible reports or allegations that undercut Israel's assurances that they're not violating international law. And in recent weeks, Oxfam, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, and a coalition of humanitarian organizations flagged numerous incidents to the Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken. So effectively what this report is concluding here is that somehow organizations like Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International and the rest of them, they have access to information that the State Department doesn't have. That's what they're trying to say here. That somehow groups like Amnesty International can find conclusive proof of Israel committing war crimes or Israel blocking humanitarian aid, but somehow the State Department, that has more fucking resources than any organization on the face of the planet, they can't figure out whether or not Israel is violating international law. What an absurd claim at face value. Now I'm going to link this down below because, as I just said there, you had all these organizations that were submitting reports to Anthony Blinken to say, here's the evidence of Israel violating international law, of using U.S. supplied weapons to commit war crimes. They have these massive reports that they all dumped out. And so I'll link this down below if you want to go read the one here from Amnesty International, but won't be surprising to see their conclusion here, where they say that Amnesty International, based on the information detailed above, finds that the government of Israel is using U.S.-made weapons in violation of international humanitarian and human rights law and inconsistent with U.S. law and policy, and has denied humanitarian assistance. The U.S. must immediately suspend the transfer of arms to the Israeli government. So that's what this is really all about. They didn't want to admit that Israel is in violation of international law, because if they admit that, then the billions of dollars in weapons that we're giving them are totally illegal, right? So that's the context of this report that just came out. Now, we also had, Joseph Robinette Biden himself, who came out and he did an interview here with a CNN reporter and outlined a little bit more of his position. So let's watch a little bit of these clips.
I made it clear that if they go into Rafah, they haven't gone into Rafah yet. If they go into Rafah, I'm not supplying the weapons that have been used historically to deal with Rafah, to deal with the cities, to deal with that problem. We're going to continue to make sure Israel is secure in terms of Iron Dome and their ability to respond to attacks like came out of the Middle East recently. But it's just wrong. We're not going to supply the weapons and artillery shells used that have been used.
Artillery shells as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have another clip here that I'll show you guys, but this is just amazing here from Joe Biden. The implication that Israel has not gone into Rafah. I mean, keep in mind, this interview, it is a couple days old here, but this interview happened after Israel already had gone into Rafah with a ground invasion. Now, granted, they hadn't at the time been engaging in a, full frontal offensive against the densely populated portions of Rafah, but they'd definitely gone into Rafah at that point. So the reason that this is interesting to me is that he already had determined that going into Rafah in any serious way is a red line for him. Okay, he's the one who said that's a red line. Now, this red line has shifted, apparently, according to these statements, to unless they go in to the densely populated places in Rafah, then that will somehow be the new red line. Well, breaking news here for Biden, they've also started that. I mean, we've had credible reports all over, Rafah coming out that people here, I mean, this is according to Yunus Tirawi, saying that people in North Gaza feel that the first days of the war are back. The amount of airstrikes is unprecedented. In the last hour alone, there have been over 30 strikes targeting Jabalia. So not only are they ramping up the offensive inside of Rafah, but they're also ramping up the offensive in the rest of Gaza as well. So the idea to me, based on the reports that I've been seeing over the last couple of days, that Israel is not in a major way going into Rafah is completely false. But that's Joe Biden's new standard, apparently, whatever that means. Again, I mean, you can cut off certain weapons. Biden has come out, he said we're going to cut off, maybe some of the 2,000-pound bombs and maybe some artillery shells here and there. But the reality of the situation is that he's not breaking from Israel. This is not a real red line. He's not cutting off the weapons supply. He's just doing sort of a virtue signal here because he had previously defined going into Rafah as a red line. And so now he's having to push himself back even further because Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu don't give a single solitary shit what this guy's red lines are because he's not willing to actually draw a red line in the sand where he cuts off support for Israel. Instead, it's sort of like, well, maybe we'll send you less 2,000-pound bombs to drop on refugee camps and we'll do this and that, but you're not actually making a real structural policy change. You are not shifting when it comes to this issue. Now, he also confirmed as a part of the same interview here with Aaron Burnett of CNN that that U.S. weapons are being used to kill civilians. So let's listen to this clip real quick.
Have those bombs, those powerful 2,000-pound bombs, been used to kill civilians in Gaza?
Civilians have been killed in Gaza as a consequence of those bombs and other ways in which they go after population centers.
Okay, so, I mean, listen, guys. I don't know how you can possibly say that U.S. supplied weapons, specifically 2,000-pound bombs, are being used on densely populated civilian areas and at the same time say that Israel is not violating international law. Okay, even the U.S. military, we've had reports from U.S. military officials who have said that even the U.S. would not use 2,000-pound bombs in such densely populated areas. Israel has used hundreds of 2,000-pound bombs inside of Gaza. These are bombs that, by definition, cannot be, targeted strikes against Hamas. They are not. It's not possible for that to be a targeted strike. It is a 2,000-pound bomb that has a massive, gargantuan radius of lethality baked within it. So to admit, as he previously has before, again, that Israel is indiscriminately bombing civilians in Gaza, and also our weapons are being used to indiscriminately bomb civilians in Gaza, okay, so then they're violating international law. What is the complicating, factor here that is making this so confusing for people? But again, he's still trying to waffle on this issue. Now, we also had this here from John Kirby, who was basically throwing cold water on the idea that these, the withholding of certain types of weapons is really a serious thing. So here we have from John Kirby, a White House spokesperson. Everybody keeps talking about pausing weapons shipments. Weapons shipments are still going to Israel, and they're still getting the vast majority of everything that they need to defend themselves. So here's John Kirby confirming that, yes, absolutely, regardless of whatever previously defined red lines that Israel crosses, regardless of whatever statements that are put out by the White House about how they're withholding certain weapon shipments, that, yes, we are still fully complicit in this genocide. That's what he's saying here. He's saying that don't listen to the media reports about, withholding some of these weapon shipments. We're still giving them everything that they want, everything that they need to continue with the genocide. So there's John Kirby for you. We also had this reporting here from Reuters that I thought was interesting. I mean, Israel due to get billions of dollars more in U.S. weapons despite Biden pause. So again, the same point that I was just making with John Kirby. So let's not be confused in this moment. The U.S. is absolutely still fully complicit and backing what Israel is doing in Gaza right now, regardless of whatever mild holdups on weapon shipments that Biden says that he's engaging in. Now, we also have this reporting here from Axios. Congress plans an all-out brawl with Biden over pausing Israel arms transfers. So apparently, there's a coalition in Congress that is trying to get together to override Joe Biden withholding some of these weapons going to Israel, and to say, within 15 days, you need to have any confirmed, allocations of aid to Israel delivered. Okay, within 15 days, 2 weeks basically. So our Congress, even though Joe Biden has gone out of his way, has done anything and everything that a human being could possibly be expected to do to support a genocide. He's given Israel everything they could possibly fucking want. And even now, after 6-7 months of this genocide, we have members of Congress who are like, oh, you hesitated to give them 2,000-pound bombs? Okay, we're going to need to override that. We're going to need to step into this situation and make sure that you are not withholding even a single artillery shell from getting to Israel. So here's where our, AIPAC-dominated Congress is at right now. We also have this, Lindsey Graham, throwing an absolute tantrum as he went on Meet the Press on MSNBC. So let's go ahead and listen to Lindsey Graham here real quick.
Historians would say, why is it okay for Reagan to do it and not President Biden? But let me ask you about
why is it okay?
Deal.
Well, can I say this? Why is it okay for America to drop 2 nuclear bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki to end their existential threat war? Why was it okay for us to do that? I thought it was okay. To Israel, do whatever you have to do to survive as a Jewish state.
Senator, again, military officials say
whatever
the technology has changed. But let me ask you about how all
these
of this
military officials that you're talking about
let me ask you
are
something.
full of crap.
Let me ask.
Okay, so this is where we're at, guys. We have U.S. senators who are, it seems like you could fairly, pull away from this that that he thinks it would be totally acceptable to nuke Gaza. How else do you interpret that clip there? He's saying the U.S. bombing of Nagasaki and Hiroshima during World War II was entirely justified. I would completely disagree with that. That was a massive war crime and a stain on the United States. But he's saying basically Israel can do whatever the fuck they want to Gaza. That's what he's saying here. He's saying don't even hesitate to ship them more weapons, regardless of what they're doing in Gaza. It doesn't make a difference how many civilians are killed, even if it was 100,000, 500,000, a million civilians. Lindsey Graham would not give a single solitary shit. So I guess thank you for confirming that to us. Now, we also had this story that was brought to us by Fox News here, as well as other outlets as well. But Biden doters rage over his pledge to pause weapon shipments to Israel. Bad decision. Biden mega donor, this guy Haim Saban, wrote senior Biden staffers an email blasting the president for pledging to withhold bomb shipments to Israel. So it's a great democracy that we have going on here in the United States, right? Where not only do we have lobbying groups like AIPAC that are not required to register as foreign lobbying groups, even though they are explicitly lobbying on behalf of the government of Israel and dump hundreds of millions of dollars over the years into political campaigns to prop up pro-Israel candidates, right? Not only do we have groups like AIPAC and DMFI and Kufi, the rest of these groups, but we also have like literal mega donors, individual people who have the power to email, to communicate with top Biden staffers to say, how dare you? How dare you even consider withholding some weapons from Israel amidst this genocide? This is a fantastic democracy that we have set up here, where our entire government is bought off by corporations, billionaires, lobbying groups. This is how our government actually works, right? Could you or me email Joe Biden staffers directly? And would they see that? Would they give a shit about it? No, because we don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars to give to Joe Biden to support his presidential campaign. So we don't have that money, therefore we don't have that influence. This is not a democracy, guys, by any stretch of the imagination. Now, we also have this reporting here from Reuters that Gaza aid operations could grind to a halt within days. And basically what they're talking about here is that because Israel just recently invaded Rafah and they've taken control of the Erez crossing, which was a major, potential crossing for aid getting in, because they've also shut down the Kerem Shalom crossing from Israel into Gaza as well, that basically it looks like there's almost no aid that's getting into Gaza right now. So this is after reporting that we got from like the World Food Program and Cindy McCain, for example, saying that there is already right now a full-blown famine in the north that is rapidly spreading south. This is after that reporting. Now we have less aid that's getting into Gaza. Why? Because Israel is not allowing the aid to get into Gaza. So tell me how this possibly lines up with Israel following in perfect accordance with international law. I mean, obviously it doesn't. And obviously the days ahead look somehow even more dire than they already did before. Now we also have this here from Ryan Grimm. New methods of criminality unveiled regularly. We have Israeli settler mobs under the supervision of Israeli security forces and the government are now sabotaging roads leading to Gaza to block and prevent humanitarian aid convoys from reaching the Strip. And you can see here the large rocks and stones that they've put in the middle of the street to try to, obfuscate or to try to block those limited aid shipments that we're going through. Now, I'll finish off with just a couple things here, right? First off is that we have had some previous, recent State Department press briefings here. We got Matthew Miller, an absolute demon who I cover all the time on this channel. And he was asked by the great Saeed Erekat, who is one of the best guys who goes to some of these State Department press briefings, and he was asked about the now 2-year anniversary of the assassination of Shireen Abu Akleh, a Palestinian-American journalist who was killed in cold blood by Israeli security forces just 2 years ago at this point. And his response was basically, it was investigated by Israel and also by us, and I don't have anything to add. And so Saeed asks, the case is closed, and he says, I don't have anything further to say. So listen, the reason I bring this up is not only because this is the 2-year anniversary of this happening, but also because of what the U.S. was saying in that initial report, that Israel has the ability to credibly investigate themselves and hold their own accountable. We are now 2 years removed from the assassination of a prominent Palestinian-American journalist. There has been no accountability whatsoever in any real sense of the word. And 2 years later, the U.S. totally fine with this, right? What was that quote from Joe Biden again a couple months back where he said, if you come after any American, we will respond, right? What happened to that, right? When it's Israel assassinating Palestinian-American journalists, suddenly it doesn't matter. When it's Saudi Arabia even, chopping up, dismembering an American journalist as well, Jamal Khashoggi, we have nothing to say about that either, right? We'll go and we'll fist bump and we'll shake hands with Mohammed bin Salman. When it's our allies, we don't even care if you kill our own journalists. We don't even care about that. You have complete carte blanche authority to operate outside the bounds of international law if you are a friend of the United States. Now, I'll finish off with this and we'll end this video because Joe Biden's polling data on this recently has not looked too good. So let's watch a little bit of this. I'll just show you guys some of the numbers here. First, we have choice for president in 2024 among 2020 Biden voters. So this is polling of people who voted for Biden in 2020. They're already Democrats. They're already Biden supporters. So if you like Biden's handling of Israel and Gaza, there's an 87% chance you're going to vote for Biden. 8% goes to Kennedy. 4% goes to Trump. If you dislike Biden's handling of Israel and Gaza, 50% support for Biden, 20% support for Kennedy, and 10% support for Trump. Now, the reason this matters is because if you also look at the other data, right, which they mentioned later on in this piece, there is a substantial portion of the Democratic Party that disagrees with Biden's handling of Israel and Gaza. So here in this poll, they have among 2020 Biden voters, 60% say that Biden has been standing by Israel too much. So we've also gotten reporting that a majority of previous Biden voters in 2020 think that Israel is committing a genocide, right? So in other words, a vast majority of Biden's own party disagrees with his handling of Israel and Gaza. And of that vast majority, only 50% say that they are going to support him. That's a fucking problem. for Joe Biden's re-election chances. So I'll finish it off with that. I mean, I don't know that any of this is surprising in any way. This is pretty much exactly what I expected from this State Department report. If it came out at all, it has now officially come out. And, it's just as disappointing as I think any of us expected. And so, again, Joe Biden can come out and he can wag his finger. He can say that he disagrees with the invasion of Rafah. He can say that he's concerned about certain instances or we're investigating certain things. But at the end of the day, his support, in his own words, for this genocide is ironclad. It's not going anywhere. He doesn't have any real hiccups as of right now. He is 100% behind what Israel is doing in Gaza right now. And this is going to be a massive political liability for him going into the future.
Politic guy has the best politics. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me. Everyone is saying